another episode of Lit with Lennon, but we're having a Georgi Dimitrov special. So we have your commie dad, or MJ, with us. How are,
Well,
I hope my sound is okay. How are things with you, MJ?
doing very well. How about yourself, Esha?
Excellent. I also have my
Right.
Stalin mug with me. Buzdaro Tavares Stalin.
All right.
I'm
So,
here too. I'm just in the little
oh, I'm
box.
so sorry. Damn it.
Hi.
Already got some comments. Welcome to Lit with Lennon. Like, subscribe, hit the bell if you haven't already. Absolutely, and super chat me, and all the good, do all the good things. And Nomo Papo is so much more organized than I am. I have great mods here. Nomo Papo has already linked our piece for today.
All
Yes.
right.
Yes. So, is there anything you want to bring up before?
Oh yeah, Jordan Peterson apparently shared some porn. And he said this is like how it's like some bondage porn, or I don't know what kind of porn.
All right.
Probably that's the only one that can be
It's
considered
a femdom. It was a
femdom
femdom.
bondage porn. And then
Must-
he was like, "This is how the Chinese Communist Party oppresses people." MJ, you seem a little taken aback.
I hadn't heard this at all. Jordan Peterson?
Yeah,
Yes,
Jordan.
he quote tweeted. Someone put it out as a joke, saying it was the CCP, and he quote tweeted all pearl clutching like, "Oh my goodness, this is what's happening at the CCP." And it was femdom. It was like these
Yeah.
milking machines on men.
How
I
do
know
you?
that the DPRK defector that he had on his show not too long ago, she just
Oh,
got in trouble for some racist remarks. So,
oh, well, by the
uh,
way, I routinely debunk her, so check out my other videos where I've debunked no Yeonmi Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, once she said something like, the people eat the rats and then the rats eat the people, and it was like, oh, everything she says is a lie. Like
right. And
she
so,
said,
I mean, he believed her, so of course he believed some ridiculous tweet there.
Oh,
exactly.
he's so easily led into that stuff. Like he's one of the ones that is so easily duped on stuff like that. But like he had to go and search this one out because he quote tweeted it. It wasn't like someone put it on him or tagged him in it. Like he saw
Right.
it and he was like, "That's believable." And he quote tweeted. I'll throw him in here. He's in here.
Excellent. Yeah. Hello, Matt. Welcome. We're talking
Hey,
about Jordan Peterson's porn that he accused of the Chinese Communist Party of engaging
So
in.
they're trying to make more people like I don't know, they're like, what is the thing? The incubator babies. All of a sudden,
Incubator babies. Yeah. Like from
then
Iraq.
I got someone going, well, you think this is, but this is what's happening. They're making it. No, they have a. It's basically a fleshlight. Like
Yeah.
it's something that when you're going to be a donor, you go and you're not comfortable, and then this is more private, and you use it. And so the person was trying to tell me that was so that they could collect all the sperm and make all
For
these
bondage
incubator.
porn.
They're
wait,
going to make incubator babies just like Iraq was.
Oh wait, but in Iraq they
Destroying them.
threw the incubator
Yes,
babies
they were
on the
throwing
cold,
them.
hard
Yeah.
floor.
Right.
yeah. So okay. So wait, what does a fleshlight have to do with
Okay,
incubator
so
babies?
you missed this. Jordan Peterson shared some bondage femdom porn where allegedly men were milked for their sperm, and he claimed that it was actually a practice
I'm
that
up to
was
speed. I'm
happening
up
in
to speed.
China.
I'm up to speed. Yeah. Okay.
I'm
So yeah. No, I remember. I remember a while ago where they had footage of some bondage club out of Taiwan where they had like this dude that was like getting turned over a
Oh
spit
yeah, I
on a
remember
fake
that.
fire, and like
That was
this way,
way quicker.
and like they were apparently exterminating Uyghurs like one at a time by method of slow roast rotisserie.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, we got a Russian listener. Здравствуйте. Сегодня наша тема это о Георгии Димитриеве.
Oh, Now I better not have to say any Russian words because
No, because he's
laughing at me.
Bulgarian. So
Right.
we're obviously not going to get it done in just
Hopefully, we may get through most of part one.
Would you be able to send me the link via WeChat, Janet, please?
Yeah. Let me do it here.
Yeah.
I actually have a PDF. It's on Marxist.com, but I have.
Just send me something so I can read along on my phone.
Yep. I will send it now. Does anyone want to start reading, or?
Yeah. Why doesn't MJ or Matt start reading?
I don't have the page up.
MJ
So
start reading. He has the book with him.
You know, I'm gonna set. Okay, let me give this in the chat here on the private chat.
Okay,
Here.
can somebody kick the spam bots if you're there? From
So it's in the private chat here, and I'm sending to WeChat. I just have to open it a different way here because I don't have it on my phone.
You can start reading, MJ, while we get.
Okay. And I want to start with the preface, if you don't mind. I know we're probably cutting it on time, but the preface is just gold.
We are 1 hour earlier because the USA moves an hour earlier, and in Russia it doesn't matter because in the winter it's dark all the time, like the sun sets at 4, and in the summer the sun never sets. So there's not. So we're actually an hour earlier. So I'm gonna get tired an hour. See, I'm perkier already, aren't I?
All right. So I'll start it off. This is Georgi Dimitrov. He's saying, comrades, as early as the 6th Congress in 1928, the Communist International warned the world proletariat that a new fascist offensive was underway and called for a struggle against it. The Congress pointed out that in more or less developed form, fascist tendencies and the germs of a fascist movement are to be found almost everywhere.
By the way, Janet, yes, this actually has this preface. Just scroll down and you'll see this preface. We just finished chapter 1, paragraph 1.
With the development of the very deep economic crisis, the general crisis of capitalism becoming sharply accentuated and the mass of working people becoming revolutionized, fascism has embarked upon a wide offensive. The ruling bourgeoisie more and more seeks salvation in fascism, with the object of taking exceptional predatory measures against the working people, preparing for an imperialist war of plunder, attacking the Soviet Union, enslaving and partitioning China, and by all these means preventing revolution. The imperialist circles are trying to shift the whole burden of the crisis onto the shoulders of the working people. That is why they need fascism.
Okay, let me quickly pause here. Around this, so this was written, so in the 1920s, like late 1920s, there was obviously a global financial crisis. In Germany, it was literally caused, and this is in Heimar Schachlat's book. He literally writes about it. What he did is they let like banks print their own notes. So whenever people talk about hyperinflation in Weimar Germany, it only not because you increase spending. It's because if you let banks print their own notes while they're trading on the stock market, that's what causes hyperinflation. And Heimar Schachman literally wrote this in his own book. So Germany, and then everything trickled down, and there was a global crisis. So when this happened, people were trying to blame the Soviet Union as usual, and God knows what else, and also the rising working class movement, which obviously had nothing to do with it, and that's what he's referring to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hold on, we have one good comment. Noble Papa says, digging the importance and urgency of MJ's reading.
Right. They are trying to solve the problem of markets by enslaving the weak nations, by intensifying colonial oppression and repartitioning the world anew by means of war. That is why they need fascism. They are striving to forestall the growth of the forces of revolution by smashing the revolutionary movement of the workers and peasants by undertaking a military attack against the Soviet Union, the bulwark of the world proletariat. That is why they need fascism.
Okay, so hold on. Somebody said my microphone is not correct. Is this better? Tell me if this is better. If not, I will fix it.
That's better. It sounded like you were like really far away for a little bit.
Yeah, the microphone was a little. The good thing about this microphone is that it doesn't pick up background noise, but the bad thing is that I have to be right in front of it to pick up my voice. So it's a trade-off. So then, if God knows, if, like my neighbor's not doing anything, but if my neighbor's, yeah, she's an old lady. She's probably just cooking. I don't want to hear her pots and pans.
In a number of countries, Germany in particular, these imperialist circles have succeeded. Before the masses had decisively turned towards revolution in inflicting defeat on the proletariat and establishing a fascist dictatorship. But it is characteristic of the victory of fascism that this victory, on the one hand, bears witness to the weakness of the proletariat, disorganized and paralyzed by the disruptive social democratic policy of class collaboration with the bourgeoisie, and on the other, express the weakness of the bourgeoisie itself, afraid of the realization of a united struggle of the working class, afraid of revolution, and no longer in a position to maintain its dictatorship over the masses by the old methods of bourgeois democracy and parliamentarianism.
Okay, so let me quickly provide background. There's a really good book written by Dana Hirsch that talks about the SPD in the 1920s and the 1930s, and the 19 right after the revolution, right after the establishment of the Weimar Republic. But they did everything that the Democratic Party in America has done or does. And basically, well, in the end, the way the Social Democratic Party basically died was like they ended up like voting for the Enabling Act while like singing Deutschland, clapping for Hitler while singing Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. And so many things. One book that you should read is called 4 Years of Political Murder in Germany, where this guy goes through all the statistics and shows that whenever like the right wing death squads murdered a left wing leader, they got like a slap on the wrist. But if like a left wing person like killed a fascist person, they basically got hung or shot or just horrible things. So what happened is that the Social Democratic Party engaged in systematic policies. So, for example, if the KPD, which is the Communist Party of Deutschland, wanted to have like a militia in order to fight against the Sturmarbeitalung, which is the fascist militia, they were like, no militias. And then they ended up they wanted the law to apply evenly, but obviously it didn't really apply evenly. They ended up cracking down on the KPD's militia so that when the SA happened, there was nothing there to fight them. And the first thing Hitler did when he came to power is he went into all the unions, busted them up, shot them, imprisoned the leaders, took their money, and basically he went for the unions. And then they changed the laws in Germany. So what happened is that the bosses got to set I wrote an article about this, my most famous article, Economy of Evil. Check that out, of course. But the bosses got to set the wages. Workers weren't allowed to strike. So so people's wages went down. And a lot of this is because of the policy from 1918 to 1930X, where the Social Democratic Party engaged in systematic policies to weaken the left-wing side of Germany, and then they kind of did a lot of both sidesing. Go ahead.
Thank you. All right, so we're on to the class character of fascism.
Sorry, can I just interject before we so what you will realize is that both Hitler and Mussolini were never elected by the people. Hitler was in a backroom deal with Hindenburg. Hitler and a whole bunch of industrialists just like came in, and then they literally handed the keys to the kingdom to Hitler. And the reason why is that Hitler's economic policy was literally like Ronald Reagan on steroids. And so basically they privatized everything. They gave state doles out to big companies. Like corporations could do anything they want. And so what you notice is that when you look at the press from those days, all the bourgeoisie press are like really loving of Hitler, including New York Times. Like when Hitler died, New York Times this thing was like, oh my God, he was a vegan. What a good guy. They even called Mussolini a new hope. So there is a big class character in that the bourgeoisie and the former Junkers and the former aristocracy were like super supportive of Hitler. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's continue. Sorry, I feel like sometimes I need to give the historical connotation.
That's fantastic. Then it's like covering both levels, the theory and the actual history that goes along with it.
Yeah.
Dimitrov goes on, he says, comrades, fascism in power was correctly described by the 13th plenum of the Executive Committee of the Communist International as the open terrorist dictatorship of the most reactionary, most chauvinistic, and most imperialist elements of finance capital. The most reactionary variety of fascism is the German type of fascism. It has the effrontery to call itself National Socialism, though it has nothing in common with socialism.
Because literally the bourgeoisie get to pick. In fact, if you look at the Nuremberg transcripts, Albert Speer called the Third Reich a branch of IG Farben Industries. Like that's how intermingled corporate power was during the fascist reign.
Wow.
Yeah. Janet, if somebody can like share my articles, Economy of Evil and Language of Evil, where I cover like how,
Yeah, I'll put them up in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and if people want to see how linked fascism and the corporate oligarchy are, read Mussolini's shock doctrine, or read Mussolini's autobiography. He writes in detail about the connection between the two.
And then if you read the trial of Adolf Hitler, what you'll see is that Hitler was basically I hate doing this. Okay, I will do this. Even Bernie Sanders jokingly called Ronald Reagan fascist president. He was basically a performer like Ronald Reagan. And so when he had like the big publicists like pumping his work. And if you read his Mein Kampf, it's like an unreadable garbage word salad. But it didn't matter because he had the like big bourgeoisie. Ernst Hanfangel was his publicist, who went to Harvard, by the way. Yeah, go ahead.
German fascism is not only bourgeois nationalism, it is fiendish chauvinism. It is a government system of political gangsterism, a system of provocation and torture practiced upon the working class and the revolutionary elements of the peasantry, the petty bourgeoisie, and the intelligentsia. It is medieval barbarity and bestiality. It is unbridled aggression in relation to other nations. German fascism is acting as the spearhead of international counter-revolution, as the chief instigator of imperialist war, as the initiator of a crusade against the Soviet Union, the great fatherland of the working people of the whole world.
And you'll see this. If you check out my thread on Twitter, when I'm trying to make that into a video, where you'll see like many of the U.S. presses literally saw Hitler as a bulwark against the Soviet Union, including President Coolidge, who met with Hitler in 1930 something. And so, all you have to do to see this is just look at any old archives of any bourgeoisie, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, doesn't even matter. Just read it and you'll see how glowingly they cover. The way New York Times covered the Action T4 is Hitler has a new plan for saving money on healthcare or something like that. It's just horrible.
Right, or Google William Randolph Hearst.
Yes, William Randolph Hearst was like one of the big pushers of Hitler. Like he was paid a lot of money to do PR for Hitler here in the U.S. and in the U.K. And like I said, any bourgeoisie press you'll see, they speak in very glowing terms. They're very happy and giddy about this.
Right.
I mean, he was Man of the Year for Time. So.
Well, I mean, a lot of people are Man of the Year. Stalin was also Man of the Year, and so I don't know if 1 year. But
It's whoever will like essentially like cause like the most it's always been discourse bait. Whoever
yeah,
like,
discourse bait. Exactly.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Go ahead.
Fascism is not a form of state power standing above both classes, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, as Otto Bauer, for instance, has asserted.
Indeed,
It,
like fascism is just pure bourgeoisie dictatorship to the point where they can commit genocide. And like a lot of people don't know this, but Auschwitz was basically a big IG Farben factory where they made this kind of rubber called Buna. So the biggest factories in Auschwitz was IG Farben Buna Works. Every single concentration camp, its primary purpose was slave labor, where they manufactured crap loads. Like Volkswagen had a concentration camp, IG Farben had many. Any company you can think of had some stuff going on in concentration camps.
right. It is not the revolt of the petty bourgeoisie which has captured the machinery of the state, as the British socialist Brailsford declares. No, fascism is not a power standing above class, nor government of the petty bourgeoisie or the lumpen proletariat over finance capital. Fascism is the power of finance capital itself. It is the organization of terrorist vengeance against the working class and the revolutionary sections of the peasantry and intelligentsia. In foreign policy, fascism is jingoism in its most brutal form, fomenting bestial hatred of other nations.
Indeed. And of course, when you do that, you can get your working class soldiers, like what happened with Mussolini in Ethiopia, to just go and slaughter like illiterate peasants or whatnot and just take everything, all of their resources. And because fascism is like capitalism always needs new raw material. It's just the most brutal form of imperialism.
Hey, I'm sorry I'm off camera. My allergies are like going crazy, so I don't want to distract everyone doing that. But
No worries.
I actually looked up the 13th plenum, and you can actually get it online. You can get the whole thing, and that's actually a pretty decent read, especially for an American because it's written by Americans. So because he's bringing up the 13th plenum and what they were saying, and a lot of these points he was actually pulling from that. So it's actually that's another good thing to read, and it's available online as a PDF.
Okay, we'll share it, and maybe one day we can read it here too.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And one thing that this is giving us that we don't get from like a more generic description of fascism, like Umberto Eco's 14.
Well, the 14 points is sorry. Sorry if I'm interrupting too much. I apologize.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I was just going to say, if the 14 points is so generic that it can literally be used for anything, because he does not talk about the economy of fascism, where you realize it is privatization, austerity, deregulation. Those are the three main ways fascism begins, with privatization, mass whatever. What's the German word? That's
Privatisierung.
Yeah, that's the word.
Exactly. It leaves out the class nature,
Exactly.
And it's and like you said, it can apply to almost anything. Definitely any colonial or imperialist, colonialist or imperialist nation, where
Exactly.
Fascism you can't just blanket. It doesn't work like that. So he says the true character of fascism must be particularly stressed because in a number of countries, under cover of social demagogy, fascism has managed to gain the following of the mass of the petty bourgeoisie. That has been dislocated by the crisis and even of certain sections of the most backward strata of the proletariat. These would never have supported fascism if they had understood its real character and its true nature.
Okay, so let me quickly add a historical footnote to this. So what happened is that there was a lot of, like in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, there was a lot of, the class and race character kind of mixed up. So the Baltic Germans ended up being a lot of these landlords, and the slaves were the Slav slaves. And so what happened is that after the Bolshevik Revolution, their gravy train ended. So before the Bolshevik Revolution, many people of these, many of these Baltic Germans would just sit in Germany and just collect rent. And it might have not even have been that much. It might have been like, I don't know, like enough to pay for their food and expenses while they're sitting and doing it. Like they could live a middle class lifestyle. But the Bolshevik Revolution cut off this gravy train, and that's why the Lebensraum propaganda was so effective, because Hitler promised to give them back their slaves, essentially. And that was what he meant by increased living room, is that we are going to go back and take, and also in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, the same thing, is that when the empire collapsed, a lot of the Germans had lands that were worked by Slavs, slave Slavs. Well, they just and this class of petty bourgeoisie was called Junkers. And so he ended up appealing to them, literally because he was able to say, hey, we can give you your slaves back so you can go back to the way life was in 1905. And of course, if the SPD had been better and they could have not done that, that would not have been appealing, because they could have just said, hey, I understand you lost your land and you're kind of sad and stuff like that, but we can still work with the economy that works for all of us, and you'll still have a decent lifestyle and so on, and we just need to kind of curb the excesses of the bourgeoisie. But they did not do that.
Mm-hmm. The development of fascism and the fascist dictatorship itself assumed different forms in different countries according to historical, social, and economic conditions, and to the national peculiarities and the international position of the given country. In certain countries, principally those in which fascism has no broad mass basis, in which the struggle of the various groups within the camp of the fascist bourgeoisie itself is rather acute, fascism does not immediately venture to abolish parliament, but allows the other bourgeois parties, as well as the social democratic parties, to retain a modicum of legality. In other countries where the ruling bourgeoisie fears an early outbreak of revolution, fascism establishes its unrestricted political monopoly, either immediately or by intensifying its reign of terror against and persecution of all rival parties and groups. This does not prevent fascism, when its position becomes particularly acute, from trying to extend its basis and, without altering its class nature, trying to combine open terroristic dictatorship with a crude sham of parliamentarianism.
So one thing that gets lost in the American history books is that they try to make it like big bad Germany, and everyone is all innocent and sweet and victims, and that's not what happened. So in France, there was a big horde of collaborators who were so France had a pretty decent, and I don't know if decent is the word, they had a modicum of parliamentarianism, but they immediately surrendered because they had so many collaborators who were who did not like the working class. So, and also about 1 million or 2 million French anti-Bolshevik League soldiers went to do Barbarossa. Finland is another example of such a country where they had some sort of sham bourgeoisie parliamentarian, but they still were involved in the siege of Leningrad. And Bulgaria was another one. It was, Georgi Dimitrov is going to talk about Bulgaria, so we'll just hit a pause on that. And Romania had a fascist dictatorship. Poland, but back then, so in fact, Germany was one of the later countries to become fascist. Hungary had the first Nuremberg laws before Germany. Poland also. In fact, if you look at the 1920s newspaper articles, they talk about how it's impossible for Jews to live in Poland because of all the restrictions.
I just want to also mention, MJ, whenever you're ready to pass the baton, just if you want to take a break from reading.
Well, it doesn't matter. Someone should take a turn. Have at it.
Yeah,
voices.
Ashley, do you want to go? You want Matt?
No,
Matt?
I'd rather not, because I have way too many comments to interject. So it's better I not read,
yeah,
because people need that voice difference.
Either.
Okay, what was the last line?
All right, so, the accession to power is the first line.
Okay.
Here, maybe MJ should read this
Okay.
paragraph, and then Matt can pick up on the next one.
The accession to power of fascism is not an ordinary succession of one bourgeois government by another, but a substitution of one state form of class domination of the bourgeoisie, bourgeois democracy, by another form, open terrorist dictatorship. It would be a serious mistake to ignore this distinction, a mistake liable to prevent the revolutionary proletariat from mobilizing the widest strata of the working people of town and country for the struggle against the menace of the seizure of power by the fascists, and from taking advantage of the contradictions which exist in the camp of the bourgeoisie itself. But it is a mistake no less serious and dangerous to underrate the importance for the establishment of fascist dictatorship of the reactionary measures of the bourgeoisie at present increasingly developing in bourgeois democratic countries. Measures which suppress the democratic liberties of the working people, falsify and curtail the rights of parliament, and intensify the repression of the revolutionary movement.
One great example, I just look at Italy in the 1920s and how they just changed the way the state, go ahead.
Comrades, the accession to power of fascism must not be conceived of in so simplified and smooth a form as though some committee or other of finance capital decided on a certain date to set up a fascist dictatorship.
Except for in Germany, that exactly happened.
In reality, fascism usually comes to power in the course of a mutual and at times severe struggle against the old bourgeois parties or a definite section of these parties in the course of a struggle even within the fascist camp itself, a struggle which at times leads to armed clashes, as we have witnessed in the case of Germany, Austria, and other countries. All this, however, does not make less important the fact that before the establishment of a fascist dictatorship, bourgeois governments usually pass through a number of preliminary stages and adopt a number of reactionary measures which directly facilitate the accession to power of fascism.
And the best example for this is the Social Democratic Party in Germany. Donna, I can't remember the name of her book, but it's Donna Hirsch's book. It's really detailed. She goes into extreme details, and the most chilling part is how similar they are to our Democratic Party.
Whoever does not fight the reactionary measures of the bourgeoisie and the growth of fascism at these preparatory stages is not in a position to prevent the victory of fascism, but on the contrary, facilitates that victory. The social democratic leaders have glossed over and concealed from the masses the true class nature of fascism, and did not call them to the struggle against the increasingly reactionary measures of the bourgeoisie. They bear great historical responsibility for the fact, and that at the decisive moment of the fascist offensive, a large section of the working people of Germany and of a number of other fascist countries failed to recognize in fascism the most bloodthirsty monster of finance capital, their most vicious enemy, and that these masses were not prepared to resist it. What is the source of the influence of fascism over the masses?
Hold on. I found her book, the excerpt that I want to read. It's called German Social Democracy and the Rise of Nazism. And so one is that so one thing I want to read is that during the Weimar's observing the course of the Social Democratic Party's demise, some historians have assumed that the party made little effort to stave off the Nazi threat and the Republic's dissolution. During Weimar's last year, they argued that the party stood immobilized, even paralyzed, a giant with the giant feet of mud. The SDP's passivity, it has been suggested, demonstrated a deficient sense of urgency from the NSDAP. Okay, so then she says, after September 1930, cognizance of the Nazi threat was great, and the very passivity of the SDP's politics corresponded to the party's leadership understanding of how best to ward off this danger. So what they did is they ended up capitulating more and more and more to them, and they tried to even like go after moderate Nazi voters. I kid you not. Jenna, I'm going to share this thread on WeChat, if you can share it with the chat, please. Go ahead.
Oh, me? Okay. What is the source of influence of fascism over the masses? Fascism is able to attract the masses because it demagogically appeals to their most urgent needs and demands. Fascism not only inflames prejudices that are deeply ingrained in the masses, but also plays on the better sentiments of the masses, on their sense of justice, and sometimes even on their revolutionary traditions. Why do the German fascists, those lackeys of the bourgeoisie and mortal enemies of socialism, represent themselves to the masses as socialists?
Because capitalism was so unpopular after the whole World War I and people like getting their faces blown off that they had to lie.
Well, I mean, this is a rhetorical question.
Yeah, I know.
We're reading the whole thing answering that.
Yeah, I know, but Americans are not smart enough for rhetorical questions. I'm sorry.
And depict their accession to power as a, quote, revolution, because they try to exploit the faith in the revolution and the urge towards socialism that lives in the hearts of the mass of working people in Germany. Fascism acts in the interests of extreme imperialists, but it presents itself to the masses in the guise of champion of an ill-treated nation and appeals to outraged national sentiments, as German fascism did, for instance, when it won the support of the masses of the petty bourgeoisie by the slogan, "Down with the Versailles Treaty."
Okay, so this is actually interesting because of the Versailles Treaty kind of did screw over Germany. So what happened is that what you have is France, America, and England, and there are all emerging capitalist powers. And to be honest, at that time, they were not as good at manufacturing stuff as Germany. Germany was clearly better at doing it. So if you look at Versailles Treaty from the point of view as these people trying to handicap their best competitor, it makes sense. They took away Ruhr Valley from Germany, which had a lot of coal in it. And then another thing is that what they did is they created Poland out of thin air. And a lot of petty bourgeoisie in Germany had lands there. And they just kind of unilaterally just went, no more land. And they gave it to some other industrialists. So if you're a petty bourgeoisie, obviously the best thing to do is to collectivize the land as they did in the Soviet Union. But instead, if you were to give it, let's say if you take away land from like a petty bourgeoisie and give it to Monsanto, it seems unfair. And of course it is unfair. But that was what they were able to play on when they met down with the Treaty of Versailles.
Fascism aims at the most unbridled exploitation of the masses, but it approaches them with the artful anti-capitalist demagogy, taking advantage of the deep hatred of the working people against the plundering bourgeoisie, the banks, trusts, and financial magnates, and advancing the slogans which at the given moment are most alluring to the politically immature masses. In Germany, quote, "The general welfare is higher than the welfare of the individual," end quote. In Italy, quote, "Our state is not a capitalist, but a corporate state," end quote. In Japan, quote, "For Japan without exploitation," end quote, and in the United States, quote, "share the wealth," end quote, and so forth. Fascism delivers up the people to be devoured by the most corrupt and venal elements, but comes before them with the demand for, quote, "an honest and incorruptible government," end quote. Speculating on the profound disillusionment of the masses in bourgeois democratic governments, fascism hypocritically denounces corruption.
Okay, so hold on. This is because fascists were so good at propaganda. A lot of I really get annoyed when people are like grammar Nazis when you say that the Nazis were sticklers to rules. They were not. In fact, if you want, so for example, Hitler had this so here's two examples of Hitler's self-dealing scams. One is that Hitler passed a law that said for every married couple, they needed to, the state needed to buy them a copy of Mein Kampf, but that cost some 10 marks, Deutschmarks, or whatever the Deutschmarks was, and Hitler got to pocket that. Another thing is Hitler had these privatized postage stamps with his Hitler logo that he sold, and he got to pocket that. So he was he ended up being really wealthy. So often you'll see people are like, communism is corrupt or whatever. And then what you see is that when you compare this with Stalin, he slept in the basement of the Kremlin in an unheated room in a single bed. Hence my joke about Stalin not jacking off because he slept in a single bed. That doesn't make sense, but he definitely did not have sex in the last 30 years of his life.
Right?
Okay.
Some military boots and two military uniforms or something like that, and 100 rubles in the bank. It's like I'm poor working class and I have more money than Stalin died with.
Exactly. And Lenin too. Lenin wanted to always be paid 5 rubles lower than the lowest paid worker, and somebody once tried to give him 50 extra rubles for his birthday, and he actually had a hissy fit and fought with them. It's like, no, you can't do that.
Okay, where did I leave?
The interests of the most reactionary.
It is in the interest of the most reactionary circles of the bourgeoisie that fascism intercepts the disappointed masses who desert the old bourgeois parties, but it impresses these masses by the vehemence of its attacks on the bourgeois governments and its irreconcilable attitude of the old bourgeois parties, surpassing in its cynicism and hypocrisy all other varieties of bourgeois reaction. Fascism adapts its demagogy to the national peculiarities of each country and even to the peculiarities of the various social strata in one and the same country. And the mass of the petty bourgeoisie and even a section of the workers reduced to despair by want, unemployment, and the insecurity of their existence fall victim to the social and chauvinist demagogy of fascism. Fascism comes to power as a party of attack on the revolutionary movement of the proletariat, on the mass of the people who are in a state of unrest. Yet it stages its accession to power as a quote revolutionary movement against the bourgeoisie on behalf of the whole nation and for the salvation of the nation. One recalls Mussolini's march on Rome, Piłsudski's march on Warsaw, Hitler's National Socialist Revolution in Germany, and so forth.
Hold on. We have one comment that's very interesting that I'm going to share. Yipper99 said, they are doing that now. Former Baltimore mayor was using public money to buy her books.
But whatever the masks that fascism adopts, whatever the forms in which it presents itself, whatever the ways by which it comes to power, fascism is a most ferocious attack by capital on the mass of the working people. Fascism is unbridled chauvinism and predatory war. Fascism is rabid reaction and counter-revolution. Fascism is the most vicious enemy of the working class and of all working people.
100% true. And unfortunately, in the U.S., they don't want you to know too much about the fascist economy because it sounds way too familiar. So they tried their best to obfuscate anything about this.
Right. MJ, you want to take the next session?
Yes. So what does fascist victory bring to the masses?
Nothing.
Right?
Auschwitz.
Nothing good.
Yeah, just Auschwitz. People are literally. Once I've written about this. One guy mentions how bad it was. Obviously he was in Auschwitz, so it's horrible. But he talks about how he once he got a pullover as a bonus when he was working for the IG Farben Buna factory, and he decided to trade it over for a bowl of soup because he said he'd rather starve. No, he'd rather freeze than starve to death because freezing is quicker.
Wow. Fascism promised the workers a fair wage, but actually it has brought them an even lower, a pauper standard of living. It promised work for the unemployed, but actually...
But hold on. Sorry. It has, yeah. And the work for the unemployed was like taking them to concentration camps and working to death. That was literally Hitler's unemployment plan.
Right. But actually, it has brought them even more painful torments of starvation and forced servile labor. In practice, it converts the workers and unemployed into pariahs of capitalist society, stripped of rights, destroys their trade unions, deprives them of the right to strike and to have their working class press, forces them into fascist organizations, plunders their social insurance funds, and transforms the mills and factories into barracks where the unbridled arbitrary rule of the capitalist reigns.
Yeah, like I said, in Germany, the employers got to set the wages, the hours. So the hours went up, the wages went down. Italy, the same thing. In fact, people had to eat. They were so hungry that people had to eat grass. Like when you eat grass, you can feel like you're full for a little while, even though you're not eating anything of nutritional value. And so whenever people say fascism, Hitler was popular, Mussolini was popular, like yesterday, some idiot said that Mussolini was popular with the Italian people. It's like, no, they shot him. And the minute you understand the economic nature of fascism locally, you'll understand there's no bloody way that people will be like, I want to starve so that IG Farben can make billions of dollars in profit.
Right, for real. Fascism promised the working youth a broad highway to a brilliant future, but actually it has brought wholesale dismissals of young workers, labor camps, and incessant military drilling for a war of conquest. Fascism promised to guarantee office workers, petty officials, and intellectuals security of existence, to destroy the omnipotent. Omnipotent?
Omnipotent.
I'm the worst things.
Okay, whatever it is.
Of the trust and wipe out profiteering by bank capital. But actually, it has brought them an even greater degree of despair and uncertainty as to the morrow. It is subjecting them to a new bureaucracy made up of the most submissive of its followers. It is setting up an intolerable dictatorship of the trusts and spreading corruption and degeneration to an unprecedented extent. Fascism promised the ruined and impoverished peasants to put an end to debt bondage, to abolish rent, and even to expropriate the landed estates without compensation.
Yeah, that did not happen. Basically, the opposite happened, where peasant lands got taken away by the big industrialists.
In the interest of the landless and ruined peasants. But actually, it is placing the laboring peasants in a state of unprecedented servitude to the trusts and fascist state apparatus, and pushes to the utmost limit the exploitation of the great mass of the peasantry by the big landowners, the banks, and the usurers.
Like I said.
Germany will be a peasant country, or it will not be at all, Hitler solemnly declared. And what did the peasants of Germany get under Hitler?
Nothing.
The moratorium, which has already been canceled, or the law on the inheritance of peasant property, which leads to millions of sons and daughters of peasants being squeezed out of villages and reduced to paupers. Farm laborers have been transformed into semi-serfs, deprived even of the elementary right of free movement.
Yeah, actually, I know this in both Italy and Germany. Peasants, it literally went back to feudalism for a lot of them, in that they could not leave their factory farm without permission from their employer. Like the only difference was that instead of it being like some inbred royal, it was like some sort of company, like Conagra, not Conagra itself.
I also feel like you can, like, that right there, like, depicts both parties in the United States too. Like, they're like, oh, we are the working class party. And then they give you something and then just take it away. So
Yeah, I mean, obviously, for the most part, the way the U.S. works is through imperial plunder, but soon that's gonna come, and so the quality of life is gonna get worse and worse and worse for most Americans, unfortunately.
Farm laborers have been transformed into semi-serfs, deprived even of the elementary right of free movement. The working peasants have been deprived of the opportunity of selling the produce of their farms in the market. And in Poland, the Poland peasant, says the Polish paper, employs methods and means which were used perhaps only in the Middle Ages. He nurses the fire in his stove and lends it to his neighbor. He splits matches into several parts. He lends dirty soap water to others. He boils herring barrels in order to obtain salt water. This is not a fable, but the actual state of affairs in the countryside, of the truth of which anybody may convince himself.
Yeah, in Italy, it's I know literally the same thing, very similar things. Obviously, they might not have done exactly the same thing, but they were impoverished to this level. In fact, people who were homeless like had to go live in caves because they got foreclosed upon and stuff like that.
And it is not communists who write this, comrades, but a Polish reactionary newspaper. But this by no means is all. Every day in the concentration camps of fascist Germany, in the cellars of the Gestapo, German secret police, in the torture chambers of Poland, in the cells of the Bulgarian and Finnish secret police, in the
Glavnyacha, it means big find or something like that in Serbia.
Thank you. In Belgrade, in the Romanian
Siguranza, which means security in Italian or Romanian.
and on the Italian islands, the best sons of the working class, revolutionary peasants, fighters for the splendid future of mankind, are being subjected to revolting tortures and indignities before which pale the most abominable acts of the czarist
Ahrana. So the Tsar had actually, this was funny. Matt and I covered this. There was a memo written by one of the czarists named Witt who said that we have too many polices in like different names. So the Tsar had like a police, because I mean, if you're going to have a slave state, most people don't want to be slaves. So you have to have a really big police organization to crack them down. And so the Ahrana did lots of like horrible things. In fact, the FBI actually took a lot of the old Ahrana files, and I think they use a lot of those methods still. But yeah.
Wow. We just share back and forth with the fascists. They take our ideas and we take their ideas.
Yeah, it's like a big information exchange. Yeah.
Yeah. The blackguardly German fascists beat husbands to a bloody pulp in the presence of their wives and send the ashes of murdered sons by parcel post to their mothers. Sterilization has been made a method of political warfare.
Action T4. Yeah, a lot of communists got forcibly sterilized. Political dissidents, yeah.
In the torture chambers, imprisoned anti-fascists are given injections of poison. Their arms are broken. Their eyes gouged out. They are strung up and have water pumped into them. The fascist swastikas carved into their living flesh. I have before me a statistical summary drawn up by the International Red Aid, international organization of that time for aid to revolutionary fighters, regarding the number of killed, wounded, arrested, maimed, and tortured to death in Germany, Poland, Italy, Austria, Bulgaria, and Yugoslavia. In Germany alone, since the National Socialists came to power, over 4,200 anti-fascist workers, peasants, employees, intellectuals, communists, Social Democrats, and members of opposition Christian organizations have been murdered. 317,800 arrested. 218,600 injured and subjected to torture. In Austria, since the battles of February last year, the Christian fascist government has murdered 1,900 revolutionary workers, maimed and injured 10,000, and arrested 40,000. And this summary, comrades, is far from complete.
And even
I just wanted to mention, like, this is 1935. This is not
Yeah.
like 1940. Like,
no, but what I was gonna say is that this number is like we'll never know, because even today in Russia, you keep still in Belarus especially, you keep still finding mass graves from like fascist times, like. So the number keeps going up. People thought it was like 20 million. Now it's probably 30 million. Like, yeah. So we'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like no one thinks of the like in America, we don't think of the 30s, of what was happening in the 30s. We're always like, World War II, and this is what happened. Like, it didn't happen until the moment the U.S. got there. And
exactly.
At Normandy, that's because if you look into World War II history, like what was going on in the U.S. in the 30s, it's mostly U.S. citizens sympathizing with Nazi Germany and refusing to be willing to participate in any action against them.
Hold on. You're absolutely right. And what most people don't realize was that Normandy happened after Russia had already liberated, not Russia, Soviet Union had liberated like about 80% of the Eastern Front. So then US and England were like, oh, it looks like the Soviet Union is going to win. We need to protect our colonies. So then that's when they did so they waited until about 80% of the battle was all fought and won, and only then.
People get mad at me on Twitter like all the time because like I point this out that and like, you know, it's a very easily observable event on a linear timeline that you can watch this, that the U.S. did not land in Europe until Germany was on the retreat from Operation Barbarossa, and they landed specifically to protect the Nazi homeland from the Soviets.
Exactly. And that's what they ended up doing. And Matt has written a great article entitled The Rampart of Civilization Against the West. And not only that's exactly what they did, and what a lot of people, like, one good example to show that the U.S. was only half-assing the fight in World War II is that if you look at the number of bombs dropped in Laos, a country that the U.S. never officially declared war on, like, they've actually dropped more bombs on Laos than they did in the entire World War II theater in both the Eastern Front and in both the European Front and the Pacific Front. So, like, if you just look at that, you'll see that they were only half-assing the fight.
Another good way to look at that is for the 6 months the U.S. was involved in World War II. Like the first 6 months, they advanced from Normandy to Normandy.
Basically, yeah. So while the Soviets liberated basically Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, like, they went through like thousands of miles around that same time. And yeah, U.S. advanced and then like later, like in 1945, after the Soviets did everything, like it was like they just came and grabbed a little bit of West Germany. And that's about it. But yeah, they literally, for about 6 months, they did not advance past Normandy itself.
No, most of U.S. involvement in World War II was stealing land in the South Pacific.
Basically, yep. They're stealing Japanese colonies and appropriating it for themselves.
You brought up a interesting, I don't know, I'd have to look into this, but Yipper was saying that the caves are now used to store wine. So the caves in Italy
actually I've seen this myself.
Now
I have seen some caves in Rome. Well, yes, he is right.
The ones people were living in as poor are now being used.
I don't know if it once people were living in it, but there are caves where they have really cool wine cellars and these restaurants.
Yeah.
Okay.
Words fail me in describing the indignation which seizes us at the thought of the torments which the working people are now undergoing in a number of fascist countries. The facts and figures we quote do not reflect 100th part of the true picture of the exploitation and tortures inflicted by the White Terror and forming part of the daily life of the working class in many capitalist countries. Volumes cannot give a just picture of the countless brutalities inflicted by fascism on the working people. With feelings of profound emotion and hatred for the fascist butchers, we dipped the banners of the Communist International before the unforgettable memory of John Scheer.
Fiete, Schultz, Lutkins in Germany, Kohlmann, Wallis, and Munich Reiter in Austria, Salai and Fürst in Hungary, Kofardziev, Luty Brodsky, and Volkov in Bulgaria.
Thank you. Impressive. Before the memory of thousands and thousands of communists, social democrats, and non-party workers, peasants and representatives of the progressive intelligentsia who have laid down their lives in the struggle against fascism. From this platform, we greet the leader of the German proletariat and the honorary chairman of our Congress, Comrade, is it Talman?
Okay, here, let me do it. Comrade Ernst Thälmann. We greet Comrade Rákóczi. He became the first premier of Communist Hungary, Gramsci, and Antikainen.
We greet Tom Mooney, who has been languishing in prison for 8 years, and the
18.
Thank you. And the thousands of other prisoners of capitalism and fascism. And we say to them, brothers in the fight, brothers in arms, you are not forgotten. We are with you. We shall give every hour of our lives, every drop of our blood for your liberation and for the liberation of all working people from the shameful regime of fascism. Comrades, it was Lenin who warned us that the bourgeoisie may succeed in overwhelming the working people by savage terror, in checking the growth of forces of revolution for brief periods of time, but that nevertheless, this would not save it from its doom. Lenin, life will assert itself, Lenin wrote. Let the bourgeoisie rave, work itself into a frenzy, overdo things, commit stupidities, take vengeance on the Bolsheviks in advance, and endeavor to kill off in India, Hungary, Germany, etc., hundreds, thousands, and hundreds of thousands more of yesterday's and tomorrow's Bolsheviks. Acting thus, the bourgeoisie acts as all classes doomed by history have acted. Communists should know that the future, at any rate, belongs to them. Therefore, we can and must combine the most intense passion in the great revolutionary struggle with the coolest and most sober evaluation of the mad ravings of the bourgeoisie. If we and the proletariat of the whole world firmly follow the path indicated by Lenin, the bourgeoisie will perish in spite of everything.
Okay, let's look at the comments. Okay. Okay, let's just take 1 minute break before we continue. We're doing really good on time today. We've kept our distractions to a minimum.
I think I see that someone was asking if Lizardo is translated to English, and I think it is.
Yeah.
Maybe some of his works are, not all.
Not all of them, but like the big ones are like the liberalism, counter history, the Stalin book. Let's see, the Nietzsche book. I don't know about. I don't necessarily think like essays are translated, but like I think like all the books proper.
All right.
Okay, so who's reading?
Janet, you want to take this?
I can read for a little bit now that my eyes are calmed down. I was having bad allergies. The victory of fascism inevitable? Why was it that fascism could triumph, and how? Fascism is the most vicious enemy of the working class and working people, who constitute 9/10 of the German people, 9/10 of the Austrian people, 9/10 of the people in other fascist countries. How, in what way, could this vicious enemy triumph? Fascism was able to come to power primarily because the working class, owing to the policy of class collaboration with the bourgeoisie pursued by the social democratic leaders, proved to be split, politically and organizationally disarmed, in face of the onslaught of the bourgeoisie. And the communist parties, on the other hand, apart from in opposition to the social democrats, were not strong enough to rouse the masses and to lead them in a decisive struggle against fascism. I just want to mention that a lot of that was in italics if people aren't reading along.
Yeah, and a lot of it was the Social Democratic Party in Germany's fault that this happened, but that's another. For me, like the idea of class collaboration is essentially trickle down economics. When the bourgeoisie is doing well, things will trickle down into you and you'll do well. And that's class collaboration. And obviously, class antagonism is when you know that what's good for the bourgeoisie is not good for you. Because, for example, for Jeff Bezos, if he, it doesn't even matter. Whatever bourgeoisie, like let's say you have 10,000 workers and you're paying them $7 an hour. And if you decide to pay them $6 an hour, you're going to automatically make $10,000 more every hour by paying them less. So that's kind of why you automatically have why automatically the class interests are antagonistic, and trickle down economics doesn't. It works for the bourgeoisie, but not for you.
Yeah. And indeed, let the millions of social democratic workers who, together with their communist brothers, are now experiencing the horrors of fascist barbarism, seriously reflect on the following. If in 1918, when revolution broke out in Germany and Austria, the Austrian and German proletariat had not followed the social democratic leadership of Otto Bauer, Friedrich Adler, and Karl Renner in Austria, and Ebert and Scheidemann in Germany, but had followed the road of the Russian Bolsheviks, the road of Lenin, there would now be no fascism in Austria or Germany, in Italy or Hungary, in Poland or in the Balkans. Not the bourgeoisie, but the working class would long ago have been the master of the situation in Europe. Take, for example, the Austrian Social Democratic Party. The revolution of 1918 raised it to...
Yep. Can I just make a quick comment? So right after the Bolshevik Revolution, a lot of these countries, a lot of the soldiers literally just checked out and decided, hey, we're not going to fight for your stupid imperial profits. I'm checking out. And so a lot of these empires collapsed. And around that time, for example, in Hungary, there was the Bela Kun Republic. In Bulgaria, there was a spark of revolutionary movements. And what happened is that the West, the Allies, US, England, US, UK, France, came together and actually installed fascist dictatorships in these countries. By like for example, they gave the fascist government in Romania lots of arms and monies to go and invade Hungary to cull the Bela Kun Republic. They put Pilsudski in power to balkanize Russia, to create Poland. So a lot of these, this is kind of what he was talking about. And a lot of this is lost in history. And the bourgeoisie were scared to death because there were so many mutinies. So when the U.S. sent over through Archangel, which is in the north, like in order to invade the Bolsheviks, the U.S. soldiers literally said, nope, we are not fighting the Bolsheviks. Go F yourself. And so they had to bring them back. And the same thing exactly happened with the Czech soldiers. And because 14 countries did invade the Bolsheviks. So they were scared shitless for just a few moments, but that's because they were so scared shitless, they installed all these fascist dictatorships in that moment. And so he's talking about that time where things could have been done differently by different leaders of these revolutionary movements that might have stopped Hitler.
Yeah. The revolution of 1918 raised it to a tremendous height. It held the power in its hands. It held strong J positions.
Strong positions. I think that's a typo.
Okay. In the army and in the state apparatus. Relying on these positions, it could have nipped fascism in the bud. But it surrendered one position of the working class after another without resistance. It allowed the bourgeoisie to strengthen its power, annul the Constitution, purge the state apparatus, army, and police force of social democratic functionaries, and take the arsenals away from the workers. It allowed the fascist bandits to murder social democratic workers with impunity and accepted the terms of the Gutenberg Pact.
Okay, hold on. So the Gutenberg Pact was basically where they got together and the right wing said, we'll disarm our storm. This was the precursor, whatever the whites, our whites, and you disarm your like communists. And then the social democratic parties were like, sure, whatever. And of course, the whites never got disarmed.
Yeah. Yeah. Which gave the fascist elements entry to the factories. At the same time, the social democratic leaders fooled the workers with the Linz program.
Okay, hold on. So the Linz program was basically, again, the same thing where they just kind of, so back that like right, so during World War I, what happened is that there was a lot of military people who were communists who had weapons, who had like an organized military. And the Linz program was like basically, hey, turn in your weapons, and we'll give you nice cushy jobs or whatever and some benefits. And then that's about it. But then they didn't ask the whites to do the same thing.
Yeah. Which contained the alternative possibility of using armed force against the bourgeoisie and establishing...
Yeah, I just need more patience. He explains everything. Okay.
And establishing the proletarian dictatorship, assuring them that in the event of the ruling class using force against the working class, the party would reply by a call for general strike or for armed struggle. As though the whole policy of preparation for a fascist attack on the working class were not one chain of acts of violence against the working class masked by constitutional forms. Even on the eve and in the course of the February battles, the Austrian social democratic leaders left the heroically fighting
Schutzbund,
isolated from the broad masses and doomed the Austrian proletariat to defeat.
Mm-hmm.
Was the victory of fascism inevitable in Germany? No. The German working class could have prevented it. But in order to do so, it should have achieved a united anti-fascist proletarian front. That's what we're reading right now. Your united front.
Yes.
And force the social democratic leaders to discontinue their campaign against the communists and to accept the repeated proposals of the Communist Party for united action against fascism.
Yeah, the Social Democratic Party saw the Communist Party as the bigger enemy than the Nazi Party that was like burgeoning. And yeah, it was literally, they tried to do the both sides. You guys disarm, we disarm, and they never disarmed. And they bloody had the police power. They could have gone and made sure they disarmed, but they didn't.
Yeah. When fascism was on the offensive and bourgeois democratic liberties were being progressively abolished by the bourgeoisie, it should not have contented itself with the verbal resolution of the Social Democrats, but should have replied by a genuine mass struggle, which would have made the fulfillment of the fascist plans of German bourgeoisie more difficult.
And they had promised to, like when Dimitrov was saying that they didn't call for, that they could have called for up there armed struggle or a general strike. These were things that they talked about and promised to do under certain conditions if that's what if the fascists did certain things.
Yeah, those conditions kept on happening. They kept on postponing.
Yeah,
exactly.
It should not have allowed the prohibition of the League of Red Front Fighters by the government of Braun and Severing, and should have established fighting contract between the League and the Reichsbanner.
Reichsbanner. Reich.
Like Reich.
Yeah.
It depends if you're from the north or the south.
Okay, whatever.
I'm from the north. No, I'm not from Germany.
I'm not from Germany.
I'm from the east of Germany. No. With its nearly 1 million members.
Oh, okay, hold on.
What?
Thank you so much, Joe Tugaz. Proletarians, rise up and take your rightful place. That's so sweet. Thank you so much.
And should have compelled Braun and Severing to arm both these organizations in order to resist and smash the fascist bands. It should have compelled the Social Democrat leaders who headed the Prussian government to adopt measures of defense against fascism, arrest the fascist leaders, close down their press, confiscate their material resources and the resources of the capitalists who were financing the fascist movement, dissolve the fascist organizations, deprive them of their weapons, and so forth.
But free speech.
Free speech.
Have you noticed free speech only like somehow applies to fascists?
I know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like free speech. I don't know what the fuck it is, but it's mine. God damn it!
I won't be able to show this to you, but it's so on point. That says there is no such thing as free speech. You know.
Oh wow, you've got a tattoo on that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's covering up the word queer. I got that tattooed on my arm when I was 18, and I've been working. I spent most of my late 20s and 30s working in small factories in Michigan, and that's not exactly the kind of environment where you want to have queer tattooed on your arm when it's legal to get fired for being queer in Michigan. And so I just had twin babies, and so I went and got my tattoo covered. And since that was the big debate was whether or not to give the alt-right free speech, I got, so I put that on there.
Yeah, cut down on all of
free
them.
speech is like their precious, their ring.
Yeah.
Well, and apparently, really, what it means is that you can't ban fracking in Oklahoma.
Exactly.
That makes sense. That's what free speech means. Okay.
Yeah.
Furthermore,
it's the free speech to scream, "Holy fuck! The water out of my sink is on fire."
Yeah.
Furthermore, it should have secured the reestablishment and extension of all forms of social assistance and the introduction of a moratorium in crisis benefits for the peasants who were being ruined under the impact of crisis by taxing the banks and the trusts, in a way winning the support of the working peasants. It was the fault of the Social Democrats of Germany that this was not done, and this is why fascism was able to triumph. I'm thinking of SBB right now, and them get a bailout.
I know. The Silicon Valley Bank, yeah. This is like, it's pathetic.
Yeah, did they even have to ask for a bailout before they were given one?
No, they just automatically got it.
Yeah.
They knew they were going to get it, so.
Yeah.
Was it inevitable that the bourgeoisie and the aristocracy should have triumphed in Spain?
I blame the anarchists for this.
I know.
Well, it is literally their fault.
Oh, okay.
I know. A country where the forces of proletarian revolt are so advantageously. How the hell do you say
Advantageously.
Advantageously.
That was it. Advantageous. Matt knows where all the syllables, all the on the syllables.
It took me a long time to figure out how to say Ronald Reagan. Remember this, Janet, when I couldn't pronounce Ronald Reagan in the...
I wish I saw that.
It's when they change up words, when they put the emphasis on a different syllable than the normal root word.
Welcome to I actually think that's a British English thing. No, like I was talking to Esha about this, like it wasn't like I realized that like with Indian words, wherever I think the emphasis is on a particular syllable, it's always the exact opposite.
Yeah, like he thought it was Kerala, and it's like no, it's Kerala.
Kerala. I thought it was
Kerala is the
Kerala,
area in Russia.
then you're like, no, it's Kerala.
Yeah.
And like what?
The Spanish socialists were in the government from the first days of the revolution. Did they establish fighting contract? Did they
contact?
Fighting contact between the working class organizations of every political opinion, including the communists and the anarchists? And did they weld? I think that's supposed to be wheel.
Yeah. No, weld is right.
Weld the working class into a united trade union organization.
Weld is when you use two metals and you use heat to put it together. So what he wanted to do is take take working class organization, and weld it together.
Did they demand the confiscation of all lands of the landlords, the church, and the monasteries in favor of the peasants in order to win over the latter to the side of the revolution? Did they attempt to fight for national self-determination for the Catalonians and the Basques and for the liberation of Morocco? They purged the army of monarchists and fascist elements and prepare it for passing over to the side of the workers and peasants? Did they dissolve the civil guard so detested by the people, the executioner of every movement of the people? Did they strike at a fascist party of Gil Robles and at the might of the Catholic Church? No, they did none of those things.
Well, they did go after the Catholic Church, but not in a.
They randomly gang raping a few nuns does not count.
Yeah, they went after the Catholic Church, just not in the way you think.
Yeah.
They rejected the frequent proposals of the communists for united action against the offensive of the bourgeois landlord reaction and fascism. They passed election laws which enabled the reactionaries to gain a majority in the Cortes parliament. Laws which penalized the popular movement, laws under which the heroic miners of Asturias are now being tried. They had peasants who were fighting for land shot by the civil guard and so on. This is the way in which the Social Democrats, by disorganizing and splitting the ranks of the working class, cleared the path of power for the fascism in Germany, Austria, and Spain. Comrades, fascism also attained power for the reason that the proletariat found itself isolated from the natural allies. Fascism attained power because it was able to win over large masses of the peasantry, owing to the fact that the Social Democrats, in the name of the working class, pursued what was in fact an anti-peasant policy.
Okay, let me interject about this. So the German, I can, because I read Dana Hirsch's book, I can talk about the German Social Democratic Party. They thought so you know how capitalism empties out the villages and makes people plop into cities? They thought it was inevitable. So they felt like if you they didn't really need the votes of the peasantry. So they kind of just ignored, kind of like what the Democratic Party is doing. They kind of ignored them as being kind of backwards and country folk, exactly like what the Democratic Party is doing, where they're like racist or whatever, and then that ended up screwing the whole world over.
Yeah, and he brings up opportunities, missed opportunities too, and the Democrats missed a lot of
Social Democrats in Germany. But yeah, you'll see everything the Social Democrats did wrong, the current Democratic Party is doing.
Oh yeah, it just mirrors it totally. The peasants saw in power a number of social democratic governments, which in his eyes were the embodiment of the power of the working class, but not one of them put an end to peasant want. None of them gave land to the peasantry.
Yeah, just because they literally thought it was inevitable that all the cities, all the rural villages, like if you build enough factories, they're all going to get emptied out, and like peasants are going to find jobs in the cities, and that just it happens, but not like that doesn't mean you while you're in the countryside you need to starve.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. In Germany, the Social Democrats did not touch the landlords. They combated the strikes of the farm laborers, with the result that long before Hitler came to power, the farm laborers of Germany were deserting the reformist trade unions, and in majority of cases were going over to the Stahlhelm and to the National Socialists. Stahlhelm is, what's that?
Stahlhelm was like a fascist light in Germany.
Just to, before I forget to say it, Bits, because this is relevant, you can read this in The Foundations of Leninism by Stalin, is when he explains why the Bolshevik Revolution was able to work in Russia was specifically because they focused on marrying the cause of the peasants with the proletariat, and by doing that was basically acknowledging that the peasants as a class were dying. So, like, the promise of the Bolsheviks was to actually, like, explicitly make that transition from peasant to proletariat as smooth as possible.
Okay, but one thing that is different is that Russia was okay. So the countries in Europe had a lot of imperial. Profits.
Oh yeah, well Russia was
had
like 500 years behind the rest of Europe in terms of like class development. Like they were living like France was in the 1500s in like the early 1900s.
Exactly. So, but also the population in Russia, there were 100 million peasants and only 2 million workers.
Oh yeah,
and in France and Germany, you didn't have that same ratio, so
that's the part of like being like behind in the development, and this is like something that we've been dealing with like pretty much since like 1848. Communist revolutions are really good at ending feudalism and really bad at ending capitalism.
Yep. I mean, like Cuba, like every country is like China, Vietnam, Cuba, even Venezuela and Bolivia, all of them, all of the ones that where you had have actual existing socialism comes, basically with the Tsarist Russia-like conditions.
Yep.
With the whole, this is something I was thinking of, and I didn't look into it or anything, but with the whole thing of like people were like, "Oh, Lenin, you jumped too fast. Like you were supposed to wait till like." Well, no, I don't think that Lenin jumped too fast, but I'm just hold on.
Okay.
But like you were supposed to wait till capitalism went through all the stages. Do you think?
Yeah, that's
what the Mensheviks thought? Yeah.
Is that why like Gorbachev just. Like,
well, no. So
no, it had nothing to do with this. Gorbachev was basically. Hold on, be quiet.
I'm super like.
Okay, fine. You suck, and then I'll talk.
Okay. Okay. So Gorbachev was basically just Khrushchevism on trucker speed, essentially. Like the whole thing with the stages of development. They tried to do that initially in Russia with the state capitalism program. They called it the new
economic program in 1922.
Yeah, the new economic program. China is China reform and opening up, basically the NEP right now
on a 50-year-old line instead of a 5-year-old.
Well, yeah, because China's dealing with literally 20% of the human species.
No, I agree. I'm just saying that it's just a slower version.
Oh yeah, no. I'm just clarifying that,
Okay,
why the scale's expanded. So basically the idea is because capitalism creates the material conditions for socialism with the development of the productive forces for the bourgeois greed, basically. Like you end up with these factories and assembly lines and all that. So the NEP and reform and opening up were designed to basically facilitate that in a controlled burn.
Okay, hold
rather
on. Can I
rather than just
inject
having this
this?
free for all disintegration.
Okay, so hold on. Yes, well, basically, if you don't have factories, factories are not available in nature. You can't just magically build them. You need to have somebody who knows how to build a factory build it for you. And the NEP and both opening up and reform, which China does, is very smart. Is that what they said? Has hey, you build our factory for us. We'll kind of dilute your stake every 10 years, and then we're gonna just the gamble, and then by then we're gonna just swallow up all your assets. And the gamble is that basically a lot of people thought China was going to be cool, like the Soviet Union. And so then they were like, yeah, sure. And then they signed all these like things where the trade secrets expire after 10 years and everything like that. So you can't build a factory without and you need these factories because otherwise people like are going to be living like they live in the 1800s where you need to have like one person plow the fields and like not have enough food.
that was the banner of the great proletarian cultural revolution in China, was better to be poor under socialism than rich under capitalism.
Yeah, that's really stupid idea.
Which is literally Kropotkin's line.
Yeah, that's the stupidest idea ever. Okay, but then so what Gorbachev tried to do was that it's different. So the Soviet Union was under severe sanctions and like they were like attacked in every single way. So he thought that if you compromised a little and kind of privatized some crap, the capitalists would stop attacking. So what he did was he capitulated for capitalists. But then when that happened, it allowed the NED to send in their Nazi death squads and go murder people and overtake the state apparatus.
Yeah,
so
Glasnost was all about letting open anti-communists take over the media. Yeah. Perestroika was all about bringing the quote
it was not about that, but that's what happened. He thought that he thought that capitalist coexistence was possible, kind of like Khrushchev. So he thought that if they were to like let them in a little bit and let them have a little bit of profit, then they would let communists continue.
Well, to quote Deng Xiaoping on Gorbachev, this man pretends he is smart, but is in fact very stupid.
Exactly. That's what happened, unfortunately.
Okay, so basically China has put, because that was the other thing that I was thinking, is China like not, but now you're telling me China has put in place stop guards from capitalism.
Oh, yeah. I've tweeted thousands of threads about this. But basically, yeah. So in China, what happens is that every 10 years, your stocks, if you're a corporation, your stock is going to get diluted by 50%, and workers have to have a seat on the board and they have to own like 40%. That's what the market socialism is. Trade secrets expire, boom, after 10 years. Patents, they expire, patents become public domain immediately after basically about 5 or 6 years.
I thought it was like basically like if you wanted China to build something for you, you had to like give them the blueprint for it.
Yeah, you have to give them the blueprint, but they won't use the blueprint they'll let you profit for about 7 years on that blueprint.
Right, but like the whole time they're like working on that tech and like
but that's fine. So those are all the
they're just not selling it themselves.
Yeah, but then the reason why it worked is because if the Soviet Union was around, the capitalists would have been a lot more paranoid, and they would not have agreed to these ridiculous China's terms because they were literally banking on being able to coup China because they were stupid.
The wartime equivalent of what basically the deals that were happening with reform and opening up were the economic accords following the Molotov-Ribbentrop agreement.
Exactly.
Where, like, basically the Soviet Union, with a gun to its head, submits to resource extractions, and in exchange for that, what they get plans for battleships, heavy artillery blueprints, like basically like.
And then those are the things that they used to go and liberate Berlin.
Yeah, exactly. Germany basically gave away their straight up military secrets for weapons technology to the Soviet Union in exchange, literally, for rocks.
Yeah, no, for
And-
coal and cobalt, for
Yeah.
minerals.
Yeah, for rocks.
Yeah,
And,
but
like,
they did it
and-
because they thought Slavs were genetically inferior
Yeah,
and
they
were
were-
never
they-
smart enough to learn all this stuff.
Yeah, that is exactly it. They were brought down literally by their own race science, which is the
Yeah.
funniest fucking thing in the world. And like that's why they do not teach actual World War II history in the United States, because it contradicts eugenics.
Yeah.
Like fundamentally.
I mean that, and they don't want you to know about the class warfare aspect of World War II.
Yeah,
They
he's-
kind of want to make it all about race.
Yep.
Mhm.
Oh,
right.
hold on. Okay. Both happened. So what happens is that the state owns 30% of the stock. This is non-negotiable. The workers own a certain percent, and the workers and that gets divided evenly among the workers, and then these shares balloon and balloon, while these shares get what do you call it? Poison pilled. The capitalist shares get poison pilled, and yeah.
All right. Does that anyone want to? We're gonna just probably finish this part, and then we'll do the conclusion next week.
No, I mean this is a lot of parts. Like we're not gonna finish.
Well, no. I mean, to part one, we're gonna finish.
Well,
but
yeah, we're gonna finish. Is the
we're gonna
victory of
finish this part of part one.
Yes, exactly.
We're gonna be doing this for a little bit.
A long bit. It'll be like the development of capitalism in Russia, where we read for like 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's gonna be probably about 6 weeks. I think.
I don't think
As long as we do it better than like what we tried to do with Mango Press and the history of the CPSU.
No, it's not our. No, that's not what happened. Chapo Trap House had like really bad takes, and like each sentence was so wrong that we had to stop and explain. Like literally, he did not know what a peasant was. He did not know what a
that was with the Getty book with the CPSU that we tried to do with Mango Press.
No, we did that. We started with that because we were doing Chapo Trap. I remember this. We were making fun of Chapo Trapo's drunken rant against Stalin. He was so wrong. Literally every sentence we had to pause 100 times to explain how every sentence was wrong.
Yeah, it took us 6 weeks to get through 2 pages of
because
history
he
of the
was
CPSU.
so. We started those because he was so wrong. It was like painful.
All right. Anyhow, I can continue reading.
Continue, please.
Who else wants to read? Any?
If you want to continue reading, because like now my allergies are kicking up.
Okay. All right. Fascism also attained power for the reason that it was able to penetrate into the ranks of the youth, whereas the Social Democrats diverted the working class youth from the class struggle, while the revolutionary proletariat did not develop the necessary educational work among the youth and did not pay enough attention to the struggle for the specific interests and demands. Fascism grasped the very acute need for the youth of militant activity. Well, I'm thinking too, like what's happening in America with the YouTube channels. Getting...
I know, but luckily YouTube channels is not the same as having like armed militias. Like so, it's way different.
And entice the considerable section of the youth into fighting detachments. The new generation of young men and women has not experienced the horrors of war. They have felt the full weight of the economic crisis, unemployment, and the disintegration of bourgeois democracy. But seeing no prospects for the future, large sections of the youth proved to be particularly receptive to fascist demagogy, which depicted for them an alluring future should fascism succeed. In this connection, we cannot avoid referring also to a number of mistakes made by the Communist parties, mistakes that hampered our struggle against fascism. All right. In our ranks, there was an impermissible underestimation of the fascist danger, a tendency, which, okay, I wanted to stop there because we actually now should not be underestimating it, and we still underestimate it.
I mean, you're way past the fascist danger in the
we're,
U.S. It's like 50 years of fascism,
oh yeah,
100 years. I mean, you're like
because,
way past that.
at
The
this point,
only
at
thing
this
that
point in
people, hold
time,
on, Matt, can I just speak for just, sorry, I have no patience today. Okay, so the only thing is that you guys don't look at all the horrors, the ears for beers in Vietnam, the rapey warlords in Afghanistan. So the only thing that Americans don't understand is that chicken is coming home to roost. So it's not that you're underestimating it. You just are okay with it happening to people who are not white.
Well, so at this point, it was marginally more forgivable to underestimate the fascist danger because, at this point, okay, yeah, in Germany, shit was scary. That came 10 years later after the rise of fascism in Italy. Mussolini was a fucking clown ass moron. I cannot stress that enough. He was hailed in the Western press very different for people actually on the European continent who had to listen to this dude talk. And it could be understated to a certain degree. Here in the US, it's not even really about understating things. It's just about either outright supporting it or just ignoring it.
Yeah, or not caring because what's happening with the fascism right now still happens to people in Afghanistan, Iraq.
Yeah, somebody just posted a meme I saw earlier today that was a skeleton's hand reaching out that was labeled fascism, and it was scratching the head of a smiling cat that said unaffected white middle class liberals. And the cat's loving it.
Yeah, more or less. Okay.
And we have the gift of hindsight. We have the gift of being able to look at, fascism historically, where it came from and what it did and know about it, where they had to experience it and fight it,
Yeah. And somehow having this massive gift of hindsight. And there's even a lot of hindsight's 2020 happening in this report. And and we still have to deal with actually the Germans were socialists and the communists were fascists.
I know. And then the worst thing is Hitler is. It's no, he was not. Nobody wants to be a slave in IG Buna works. Working 20 hours a day for a bowl of soup. They just, the minute you understand the economy, you realize there was no fucking way it was popular except among people who were CEOs of IG Farben.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I want to say too, I want to go through what I learned about the war and what was happening in the concentration camps. They always use concentration. They didn't really say labor camp.
Every single concentration camp was was a labor factory for some corporation. Auschwitz was clearly IG Farben Buna Works, which is this rubber thingy. So the Treblinka, I can't remember what it was.
Treblinka, that was they did some labor there, but that was actually a transitory thing, moving you from one camp to a bigger camp.
Oh, yeah. Oh, by the way, okay, but it doesn't matter. Okay, well, the ultimate point is every concentration camp there was a big factory in every concentration camp that worked laborers to death. Yeah, well, and the people people like Volkswagen, every company that you can think of that's currently alive in Europe profited from it. Because what they would do is they would underpay the labor. The daily death rates was 10% because they were so worked to death. And each of these camps was actually a factory. And a lot of these camps were privatized, like Auschwitz. It was built exclusively. IG Farben built it. So these were all privatized camps.
The program was explicitly called Death Through Work.
Exactly.
And Auschwitz, the gates of Auschwitz in
Arbeit macht frei.
Yeah.
We actually put up our Auschwitz documentary, which is not being systematically taken down, but all other documentaries that we put in that I translated from Russian to English have been systematically taken down.
Yeah, work makes you free. That was their big thing. The other thing that they leave out is they did not become extermination camps specifically
until the Soviets were on the door.
Yeah, until they started losing in
And
Operation
then they wanted to get
Barbarossa.
rid of the evidence. So right
Well,
before
no,
the
it was
Soviet,
it
hold
wasn't
on.
it wasn't to get rid of the evidence. What they needed to do was empty out the camps of people that were already withering and fill them with more people so they could steal their shit to fund the machine. Like it was a primitive accumulation scam at that point. By the time the mass extermination started, they didn't have time to build more camps, and they didn't have any space to fill it with more people.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And but they also did end up a mass extermination camp right before, like the Auschwitz. They killed about 50,000 people right before the Soviets came, so that there wouldn't be any witnesses left.
And that's partially why it's so offensive and appalling how people will try and say that China has concentration camps when even the things that they're talking about, 3 million people have went through those programs and have went in and out. They go out of concentration camps where you're not meant to leave.
And
Exactly.
here's the thing, like when they talk about the sheer amount of, and like it got to a point last year where the amount of prisoners they were lying about having actually exceeded the Uyghur population of Xinjiang. But the thing to remember is the United States holds a quarter of the world's prison population. The amount
in actual
of
numbers, there are more people in a prison in U.S. than in India and China combined, and India and China both have over 1.5 billion people.
Right. In the actual, so it's 25% of the world's prison population is housed in the United States,
and 5% of the world's population.
Can I finish?
Yes, you can finish.
Okay, is 25% of the world's prison population is housed in the United States. It's 1.2 million people total.
Yeah.
So when people try to tell you that there's like 12 million people in prison in Xinjiang, you would literally be able to see that from space, and it wouldn't be like a grainy, ambiguous satellite photo that Adrian Zenz likes to throw up on his Twitter header.
Yeah.
Like the reality is, these 1.2 million people, constituting a quarter of the world's prison population in the United States, are housed in 1,800 buildings. In order to incarcerate 12 million people or 20 million people, whatever the fuck number they're making up, it would glow from space. You could see it like a literal city. Like it's not something that would like be in any way like even vaguely look decentralized. Like especially in Xinjiang, which is a desert 3 times the size of Texas, if there were like bright lights somewhere in the middle of fucking nowhere, you'd realize it.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so let's continue.
A case in point is the opinion formally to be met with in our parties that Germany is not Italy. Meaning that fascism may have succeeded in Italy, but that its success in Germany was out of the question because the latter is an industrially and culturally highly developed country.
Oh boy, that's the opposite.
We're too smart. We're too smart for fascism here.
No, that's the opposite, because you have actually more idealism in your crappy education in industrialized countries, and you are more removed from production. So fascism is much easier for fascism.
If anything, the Germans were like specifically prepared for it because the Prussian state, their entire education model was designed to prepare children to work in factories.
Basically, yep, exactly.
Yep.
Okay.
Which is interestingly is still the exact same model that we use in the United States today.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Go figure.
Von Bismarck's model.
Yeah.
Yeah. With 40 years of tradition of the working class movement in which fascism was impossible, or the kind of opinion which is to be met with nowadays, to the effect that in countries of classical bourgeois democracy, the soil for fascism does not exist. Such opinions have served.
That's so cute.
Adorable, yeah.
Such opinions have served and may serve to relax vigilance towards the fascist danger and to render the mobilization of the proletariat in the struggle against fascism more difficult. One might also cite quite a few instances where communists were taken unawares by a fascist coup. Remember Bulgaria, where the leadership of our party took up a neutral, but in fact opportunist position with regard to a coup d'etat of June 9th, 1923. Poland, where in May 1926, the leadership of the Communist Party, making a wrong estimate of the motive forces of the Polish Revolution, did not realize the fascist nature of Pilsudski
Pilsudski. Yeah.
coup and trailed in the rear of events. Finland, where our party based itself on a false conception of slow and gradual fascization and overlooked the fascist coup, which was being prepared by the leading group of the bourgeoisie and which took the party and the working class unawares. When National Socialism has already become a menacing mass movement in Germany, there were comrades who regarded the Brüning government as already a government of fascist dictatorship and who boastfully declared, if Hitler's Third Reich ever comes about, it will be 6 feet underground and above it will be the victorious power of the workers.
I mean, that was true in 1945.
Yeah, I mean, like, in a way.
Yeah,
like,
that happened in 1945 in East Germany. Okay.
Yeah. Our comrades like the communists corrected. I mean, they made mistakes, but they didn't know about fascism. Is
exactly
saying. Our comrades in Germany for a long time failed to fully reckon with the wounded national sentiments and the indignation of the masses against the Versailles Treaty. They treated as of little account the waverings of the peasantry and petty bourgeoisie. They were late in drawing up their program of social and national emancipation, and when they
Thank you for this. I'm sorry, this was meant as a joke. Somebody said I live for Isha's interruptions, and I made an interruption. Just it's
sure you can live for them, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's like my slightly irrelevant interruptions. Yeah.
And when they did put it forward, they were unable to adapt it to the concrete demands and to the level of the masses. They were even unable to popularize it widely among the masses. Hey, MJ, do you want to take us to the end?
In a number of countries, the necessary development of a mass fight against fascism was replaced by barren debates on the nature of fascism in general, and by a sectarian attitude in formulating and solving the immediate political tasks of the party. Comrades, it is not simply because we want to dig up the past that we speak of the causes of the victory of fascism, that we point to the historical responsibility of the Social Democrats for the defeat of the working class, and that we also point out our own mistakes in the fight against fascism. We are not historians divorced from living reality. We, active fighters of the working class, are obliged to answer the question that is tormenting millions of workers. Can the victory of fascism be prevented, and how? And we reply to these millions of workers, yes, comrades, the road to fascism can be blocked. It is quite possible. It depends on ourselves, on the workers, the peasants, and all working people. Whether the victory of fascism can be prevented depends first and foremost on the militant activity of the working class itself, on whether its forces are welded into a single militant army combating the offensive of capitalism and fascism. By establishing its fighting unity, the proletariat would paralyze the influence of fascism over the peasantry, the urban petty bourgeoisie, the youth and the intelligentsia, and would be able to neutralize one section of them and win over the other section. Second, it depends on the existence of a strong revolutionary party, correctly leading the struggle of the working people against fascism. A party which systematically calls on the workers to retreat in the face of fascism and permits the fascist bourgeoisie to strengthen its positions is doomed to lead the workers to defeat. Third, it depends on a correct policy of the working class toward the peasantry and the petty bourgeois masses of the towns. These masses must be taken as they are and not as we should like to have them. It is the process of the struggle that they will overcome their doubts and waverings. It is only by patient attitude towards their inevitable waverings, it is only by the political help of the proletariat that they will be able to rise to a higher level of revolutionary consciousness and activity. Fourth, it depends on the vigilance and timely action of the revolutionary proletariat. The latter must not allow fascism to take it unawares. It must not surrender the initiative to fascism, but must inflict decisive blows on it before it can gather its forces. It must not allow fascism to consolidate its position. It must repel fascism wherever and whenever it rears its head. It must not allow fascism to gain new positions. This is what the French proletariat is so successfully trying to do. These are the main conditions for preventing the growth of fascism and its accession to power.
Okay, so we'll start next. If MJ is available, hopefully he is. We'll start next week with fascism, a ferocious but unstable power.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah. Well, we'll do a few weeks, and then if we need a break in between, we'll do a break in between. But we'll finish this off. Hopefully, MJ will be here for every episode we're doing of Dimitrov. So
Yeah. I'd rather not do it without him because I don't know enough about Dimitrov to do an episode.
Definitely happy and willing to be here.
Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, so with that, this week we're going to have a good episode with Christopher Dilworth on historically. I'm also trying to write some articles because I got my thing that was blocking me fixed. The problem, which I don't, and not really fixed, but it will be fixed soon. And what else is there? I was on Press TV yesterday, and I'm probably going to be on again. And check out our videos of me on Press TV being smart.
Yeah, you're putting those all up on the historically channel.
Yeah,
too.
I tried to.
Yeah. So, all right.
Excellent. So you can follow me on Twitter at uncle_authority. I'm a unemployed disabled dude trying to raise money for a tablet so I could do art stuff on the go and make awesome propaganda. So please make use of my tip jar if you feel so inclined. I would really appreciate that because technology is expensive.
It is. All right. Where can we find you, MJ? You're on TikTok.
TikTok, YouTube, Your Commie Dad. That's
Okay.
pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I need to go back on TikTok, but I've been having TikTokers block. I don't know what to TikTok about. But MJ gave me a great idea about like taking my camera and going through subway stations and here in Lenin, Petrograd, whatever you want to.
Yeah,
call
I want to
city.
see. I want to see more Russia. That's
Okay,
fine.
I will definitely do that. With that, I will say Svoboda narodu, smrti fascism. Oh my God, thank you so much, Techloid. I love you too. This is really sweet.
Thank you.
You guys are too sweet. Thank you.
All right. Bye. See you next
Bye.
week.
Bye.
Everyone.